What if you've been gaslit into taking your own medical advice? We
What?
are your whistleblowing shrinks, Dr. Teralyn and Therapist Jenn, and this is the Gaslit Truth Podcast. Boy, do we have a
Welcome,
special guest
everybody.
today. Yes. All right, Jen, who
You
do we have?
bring her in, you slide her in.
All
Everybody,
right,
today we
sliding
have
in.
Nicole Lamberson on the show.
Hi.
Lamberson, we got her. Is she in the middle? Gotta fix that. There she
Yeah.
is. Hi,
Did you put a
Nicole.
T in
Yeah,
there?
she's in the middle
Sometimes
now.
I
everybody
did,
wants
but
to
I
call me
I undid the
person.
T.
Yeah.
Why does it sound good with the T? Do other people do that?
All the
Lambertson?
time. I'm like, I
Okay,
feel
all
like
right.
it's a pretty straightforward last name, but it's butchered
Oh,
constantly.
man.
So,
Okay. All right.
yeah.
Let's try this again. We have Nicole Lamberson. Look at that. Did I do it
Yes.
right? Okay. And Nicole is a physician assistant, everyone. She's based in Virginia, who has personally overcome the challenges of polypharmacy with prescribed psychiatric meds, leading to a severe and prolonged withdrawal syndrome. She currently serves as the medical director for the nonprofit organization Benzodiazepine Information Coalition. Nicole co-founded the Withdrawal Project of the Inner Compass Initiative, and she plays a key role in marketing, distribution, and outreach for the documentary Medicating Normal. She is also recognized for her contributions to the Maudsley Deprescribing Guidelines, a comprehensive resource for the safe reduction or
Oh,
discontinuation
shoot,
of
I don't have
antidepressants.
mine nearby.
Oh, you have a copy with all
I
kinds of
Oh, girl, I'm a
notes.
deep prescriber. I live off of this manual. I
Nice.
don't sleep with it quite yet, but I got damn close.
Here's mine.
Oh,
Oh,
you
look
too.
at you. There you go. Look at
Awesome.
Yes.
I
little,
love
your
it.
little
Mark
tabbies.
Horowitz
Oh
would be
yeah.
so
This is
proud.
oh gosh. Listen, this
Jen's
is a
got better
thing.
tabs than I do on
I
this
Yeah.
thing.
I
I just
tab
have
everything.
sticky
It's
notes.
fine.
Mhm.
It's okay. It's not crazy. All right. Maudsley's guideline. This is our resource, guys, for safe reduction of discontinuation of antidepressants, benzos, gabapentinoids, Z drugs. Your like Bible for those of us that are deep prescribers or working with people who are going through withdrawal. I'm going to add that right in there. Okay. Nicole recently contributed to the American Society of Addictions Medicine's People with Lived Experience panel. She helped develop the U.S. Benzodiazepine Deprescribing Guidelines, which was a project funded by the FDA. And additionally, she works as a coach for individuals navigating the process of discontinuing psychiatric medication. She does that through the Taper Clinic with Dr. Yosef. Shout out to Dr. J. We love you. Welcome to the
Yeah.
show, Nicole.
Oh,
I just
thanks.
ad-libbed a lot of that bio, so I hope it's okay.
Yeah, totally okay. You did great.
Do you sleep?
Before
I
we
want to
recorded,
know.
I was saying I need to quit some stuff, I think.
Yeah, you
It's
got to
too
record.
many.
She said, she said, you guys before she goes, you're like, I had to quit some shit. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot of shit on there.
I don't know if
Mm.
you sleep. I don't think you get any sleep because this is a lot of advocacy here, a lot of
Yeah.
advocacy and mental tasking. And by the
Yeah.
way, I just want to say thank you um,
Yeah.
for everything you're doing for this really hurt community, because I also know that you're part of it, and
Yep.
Jen and I are too. So, and I also really want to say thank you for this
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Well,
book.
that's all Mark, really,
Yeah.
Yeah.
but
Oh, yeah. But you're part of
yeah.
it.
You're in
And
it. You're in it,
so,
girl.
yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you for being part of that wonderful, necessary
Yeah.
book
I love
that
it.
we all need in this community. So thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Well, and thanks to you guys too for, getting the book, wanting to, be on the right side of history, really. So, yeah.
Oh, I like that
That's
because I
good.
do. Because we've been on the
Mhm.
wrong side of history for a long time,
Mhm.
and also being part of history for a long time. Um, with that being said, we started this whole episode off with, "Have you been gaslit by your own medical advice?" And
Mhm.
I think that is a very strong place to begin with your history. So, would you mind sharing with us how you were gaslit by your own medical advice?
Yeah, so I mean, before I took psychiatric medications, I went to PA school. I was training to be a PA. And when I started taking psychiatric medications, I was in PA school and moving into graduating and starting to seeing patients. And I think being trained as any medical professional, I think it's just kind of baked into your education. Before we came on, I looked up the definition of gaslit because I want to be careful. Like, I try to think back about when I was practicing and seeing patients. Did I ever have like some motivation to be, like, well, if we look at the definition of gaslit, like making someone dependent on the perpetrator or like grossly misleading someone for your own advantage. I don't think it's that so much with physicians and PAs and nurse practitioners and medical providers as much as it is just how we're taught and like ignorance.
Mhm.
And when I say how we're taught, I mean like, in our training, it's like, well, look out to see if your patient is a malingerer, look out to see if your patient is maybe using more than they're supposed to of their medication, or if they're lying to you, so you're kind of like trained to be suspicious of your patients. And I think that comes out in how providers then go into practice and treat people. Um, Also, though, you're trained into using these medications, psychiatric drugs is what we're really talking about today, but other medications too. And there was a ton of focus on how safe and effective they are and, what they treat, but not a lot of criticism or looking at like the downsides of medicine or how do we get people off of them when they're harming people or not working. There was very little, if any, focus on that. So I think,
That's what I wanted
yeah.
to ask you about that. You're the first like PA that we've had here on the show, and we've had other individuals that have talked a little bit about this same kind of idea. But
Mhm.
so this is not something that formally education wise for you received, or was there any awareness on here's how you put them on, but here's what you have to know to get them off. And I'm not talking like the traditional let's do every other day for a couple weeks, or let's remove one and we'll add another one, like all of the things that are typical. Like, was there any formal education you received on here is how you safely get someone off of these?
No, absolutely zero.
Okay.
Yeah, none. There's the typical standard like side effects and look out for side effects. But again, I think that, I mean, we can be gaslit by language, like,
Oh,
oh,
sure.
it's so just this little thing over here on the side, where the term I think we should be using is adverse effects, things that are, you know, bad or but it's not this like little thing on the side. Sometimes adverse effects are really bad for patients, so it was kind of like this minimized thing. Oh well, it might cause some side effects, but no big discussion on like how medications can go horribly bad for people sometimes, how to get them off safely, what withdrawal symptoms could happen. I mean, that benzos, if you abruptly discontinue them, can cause seizures, but that was kind of the extent of, the training, really.
Yeah, benzos are like the only classification that we talk about in those terms.
Yes.
Mhm.
Your standard SSRI, SNRI is not really it's like don't go cold turkey,
Yep.
but it's because it might be bad for you, not because you might have a seizure and die. So there's, the
Yeah.
benzodiazepine has that, at least has that huge warning,
Yes.
whereas other classes don't have those huge
Yeah,
warnings.
it's not like the SSRIs say you could have akathisia and then unaliving thoughts and end your life, which is very reality, but that's not part of it, right? That's not
Yeah.
something that you see on the SSRI, like withdrawal
Yeah. Well,
community
there's
when they're talking
even,
about it.
professionals in this space who I work with who mean well, who are totally 100% in on the benzo issue. They know that they're causing physical dependence and withdrawal and severe suffering, but you can't get them to come in on the antidepressant thing. They're like, oh, so we switched them to an antidepressant. And I'm like, no, like, how can you not? But some people just kind of like meet you halfway, and that's as far as they're willing to come. And I don't think it's, again, like some deep, they're trying to keep people stuck under their care, but they just
Yeah,
don't know.
I wanna say I don't believe that Jen and I think that either.
Yeah.
What I think is that a lot of people are left in slumber,
Hmm.
and when they see the iatrogenic harm that's caused, like, they dismiss it, or they're not looking at it as that because they're trained to think, like, a pill is going to fix this thing, so I'm going to find the best one for this patient. Um, I can't say 100% of the time that
No,
you
no.
know,
Yeah.
but Jen and I have talked a lot about manipulative language and things like that that we've said and
Yeah.
done in our practices and along the way. And I
Mhm.
think that happens a lot. And again, the intention isn't to harm. The outcome could be harm.
Mhm.
But I don't know that I don't think I know that I did not intentionally go in to cause anybody harm. I would say things to um, make sure they were compliant, because those are words that we used in the space, as compliance and things like
Mhm.
that.
Yeah, or,
Um,
"Oh, that patient is non-compliant," that's a big
Non-compliant,
one.
yeah,
Mhm.
non-compliant.
I
I mean,
I
As
think
if you're, like, the overlord of their
yes,
decisions and
the
care, right?
overlord. I like that.
well,
Mhm.
here's the thing, Nicole, and I'm curious to know your opinion on this. So all right, we've hit a space within this where okay, there is research that is out there. It's been there for quite some time. Okay, it's not like this is a brand new thing. Okay,
Yeah.
there are enough people speaking out. There is enough information out there. The part I think about this that bothers me the most, and I'm not sure what your view is on this. Yes, and Terry, I agree. Terry and I are not sitting here going all physicians or prescribers are bad people and are going in this with like to harm their patients, right?
Yeah.
We know that that's not happening, right? Okay, but
There's a
my
lot of ego driven in some of these
Oh,
things, but that's a whole
there's a
different thing.
shit ton of ego.
in
Okay.
Mhm.
certain
There's
specialties worse. Surgeons.
Yes,
yes.
Sorry,
yes.
surgeons, but they're bad.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Sorry.
with the
Sorry,
ego. Yeah.
surgeons.
Yeah.
But my issue is here's the biggest problem that I have is if you're the basis of what you do is there's so much academia behind it. There's so much research behind it. I mean, y'all didn't get into this field and wake up one day and go, oh, okay, I've got advanced degrees and I mean, I spent a shit ton of time doing that. Okay.
Yeah.
Like, okay. So, how is it that with the information that we have now, you're not even in a space or people are not even in a space to get curious, just use what happened to being inquisitive within some of this process, because that's how you got to where you were in the first place. The basis of what you do is heavily rooted in academia and in research. Okay, so now all of this is there, but that is easily dismissed. That's the
Mhm.
part that I can't wrap my brain around, is the idea that I'm a physician, I'm a prescriber, and I can't go just a little farther to read about this, to
Yeah.
actually pick up a manual that has 19,400 references in it of things that are research based, a good chunk of them that are rooted in academia, but
Mhm.
I won't even look at that.
Yeah.
That ignorance, that level of ignorance is where then I believe that to me is iatrogenic.
Yeah. I say all the time, like, it's forgivable to have not known because the system is set up for people not to know, right? Like, the
Yep.
training isn't there. Although I
Yep.
do meet some younger psychiatrists now who are like, "Oh, yeah, this was in my program." So some things may be changing since I went to school.
Yeah.
But it's understandable if you were trained to not know or you weren't given the information, but it's really unforgivable for you to deny when your patient comes in and says, "This is happening to me, and here's this information, here's this book, here's this,
Yep.
all these articles and et cetera," and for you to still dig in your heels and say, "Nope,
Yep.
not possible, not happening, not real." That's the problem. And so I think the answer to your question is like so huge. Why?
Yeah.
Why not get curious, right? Well, if you
Yeah.
know what it's like, and this is going to sound like an excuse, and I don't want it to because there is no excuse when patients are being harmed, but like to work in corporate medicine and you have 10 minutes and they're sending you
Mhm.
bulletins once a month saying if you don't speed up your time and be more efficient and see more patients, and oh, by the way, your dictations are 72 words too long, hurry up,
Yep.
hurry up, hurry up. It's not a good
Mhm.
system to be able to have a ton of extra time to sit. And I mean, this is a problem that takes like I don't think I became a so-called expert in it until I sat down and really like studied and learned and devoted my life to
Mhm.
it. And you saw the size of that purple textbook. Like most
Mm.
physicians and medical people who are learning things are doing it selfishly because they need CMEs, right? So they're going to pick something that has something attached to it that gets their CME credits
Yep.
met. And so one thing maybe we can do is try to get CME or something assigned to these topics so that maybe people will choose,
Yeah.
to learn about this because there's something in it for them.
Yeah.
Um, I also think that there's cognitive dissonance at play. Like we're asking people to accept that they've been practicing in a way that's harmful, and that's
Yeah.
really hard to do for anybody,
Yep.
with any
Mhm.
topic to say like you were wrong, you have to admit that, and also you may have been harming people.
I think
So,
because there's an assumption of intentionality there.
mhm,
Like I have not been harming people
Mhm.
because we're defending the intention, right? Like I am not a harmful person. I haven't done it. Instead of saying, you know what?
yeah,
Unintentionally, maybe I did,
Yep.
yeah,
and then getting really curious about that. That's what Jen and I have talked about. Like unintentionally, we've harmed people,
Yes.
you know? And now
yeah,
there's no forgiveness if we keep doing it. That's the thing.
yeah.
Once you can't continue doing what you did before.
Yeah. And so, sometimes also people are like burnout and I'm already like, strapped for time and all these patients and their problems. And now you want me to like learn something new and change
Yeah.
everything. And it's just like, I think there's a ton of burnout in the space. And you also asked about like, um, why aren't providers curious? And I think some of it is just, well, like I said, they don't have the time to be. But also a lot of people, and myself included in this, when I went to school, like I was really good at memorizing things and I was super book smart, and I wasn't critical or somebody who like questioned. And so people who are by nature, I always try to ask them like, why? How did you become so like look behind the curtain? Is that just how you've always been? Because I just studied, read, regurgitated, and did well, and was naive and believed what I was being taught.
Yep.
Maybe because I grew up in a medical family and like, daughters and their dads. So I thought, oh, my dad is a doctor and he helps people. And so my sense of medical care was doctors always help, they never harm. And so I just naturally trusted and thought all these doctors are training me. They're giving me the right information. I had no freaking idea that there was like this dark side to really much of anything. I mean, when I got harmed, this is what I said to my dad. I'm going to go to the FDA and tell them and the drug companies. And he just like cackled in my face, like, what? Like, but that's how naive I was. I really thought that these institutions would like give a shit that this was happening.
That's
So,
interesting. Because you're
mhm,
talking to fellow rule followers. Anyways,
mhm,
me, I don't know about Jen, but it's kind of the same thing. Like, give me the information and I take the information. It wasn't until the last, I don't know, maybe 10 years that I started getting like real interested in this. But I
mhm,
do remember in undergrad, which was a long time ago for me, we had to take a class called critical thinking. It was a
mm.
class we had to take. And now that's not there anymore, and I'm like,
No.
"Bring it back. Please bring
Yeah.
that class back." Like, we need to have access to that, instead of some of these other things that you're required to take, but,
Mhm.
when you were describing I used to play the flute, okay? I played the flute for 8 years, alright? But I played the notes, right? I played the notes as they were on the sheet, right?
Yeah.
Do, 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 exactly like that. And I would always look at the people that could just sight read or play by ear or do all these things and wonder how can you do that? Because I'm so rigid in the
Yeah.
way that I play and the way that I think, and
Mhm.
to me that was the example of like Like, yeah, it's like somebody who can play life by ear and can pick up on things that other people can't pick up on, who are just book smart. Not just,
Yeah.
because that's a big deal too, to be book smart, but like just reading the sheet music, reading the
Yeah.
notes, playing the notes as they're written and not deviating from that at all is a difficult thing to do for
Yeah.
academics,
Well,
you know?
especially, I mean, some of it is probably like genetics or how you were raised. If you
Sure.
raised in a house that you were like, everything is cautious and
Artistic.
follow the
Yeah.
rules. Yeah.
Mhm.
But, I think we can change how we were, especially when you have a big learning experience. My grandmother used to always say, Mother experience teaches a valuable lesson, but she charges a hefty fee, and
It
it's
does.
so true.
I
Uh,
like that.
but
Your
you
grandma's
get
right.
experience and then you can do and be different. Like I am so much more critically thinking and curious now. And one of the people that I interviewed on Medicating Normal's YouTube channel, her name's Margaret Heffernan. She has a brilliant TED Talk about a concept called willful blindness, where people are willfully blind to
Yep.
things. And she wrote a whole book on why it happens and how many horribly, terrible things came from people being willfully blind. And when I asked her in the interview, like, how do we not be that way? And she was like, well, everyone is, and you're gonna be, and like, because it's just human. But you can start listening more to friends or people in your circle who are questioners, like who are talking about things away from the norm. And instead of just automatically dismissing them, like start getting curious
Mhm.
and looking into what they're saying because they might be onto something,
Mhm.
you
Yeah.
know?
Or away from your norm,
Yeah.
right? Like, just talking differently about the same subject,
Hmm.
right? Like, really listening to understand that person deeply. You don't have to agree with them,
Yeah.
Yeah.
but you
And
can
some of them, I
understand
mean,
them.
they still may be tinfoil hat weirdos at the end of the
I
day
still
once you
wanna
do
know
your
why, like, why?
deep
Why are you
dig.
why are you
Yeah.
wearing a
But
tinfoil hat?
yeah.
So Nicole, you mentioned the comment about your dad and how when you came to some realizations that were happening for yourself from the psychiatric harm that was done, right? It was like, well, I'm going to go to the FDA and
Mhm.
I'm going to like, don't you people
I'm gonna
know
blow the
like
lid
you're
off of
Yeah,
this,
like I was
yes.
gonna call Pfizer and be like,
hell
hello.
yeah, you're
Yeah.
fucking people
You
up,
heard
right?
me, don't you
Did you
know?
guys
Yeah.
know that this drug is dangerous?
Yeah,
Like
I mean, okay,
so
so
dumb.
in
Yeah.
your when I was reading your bio, one of the first things that I'm like I have to ask her about is,
Mhm.
and then you mentioned this, right? So when I see the FDA, not only as a consumer, okay, and as someone who has been harmed by psych meds, but also helps people get through deprescribing off of psych meds, right? I see those three letters and I get real pissed off. Okay.
Yeah.
Lots and lots and lots of things anger me when I see that. Now, I'm curious about the fact that you are working on a project that
Mhm.
was funded by the FDA, the US Benzo Deprescribing right project,
Yeah.
correct? Okay. Tell us a little bit about that and whether or not what you're willing to share with that, and if there was some hesitation to do that, if it was something that just based off of the harm that's happened to you. How do you trust those three letters and work hand in hand with them doing a project with them?
Yeah. So I mean, the FDA wasn't anyone that we actually met with, although they were involved, they put up the money.
Hmm.
But I didn't ever hesitate to do the project. I mean, I just felt like going in, I had measured expectations. I knew, okay, this is a mainstream medical society, the American Society of Addiction Medicine, who got the grant.
Yep.
They are only going to move, but so much. But if I can show up with all these other patients and they are nice enough to have this panel, I was skeptical. Like, are they just checking the box? Like, we had a patient panel and
Yep.
they're not going to listen to us? Um, and on some things they didn't, but they did listen quite a bit, actually. And they took feedback from us and they changed lots of things to where the guidance was way better than it would have been had we not attended. And also shout out to all the people who filled out the public commentary portion when the guidelines were up for public comment. I think that helped quite a bit as well.
Yeah.
So are the guidelines perfect? No. Maudsley's much better. So if anybody asked me, I'd say just buy the purple book, but
Fair.
there's stuff in the ASAM guidance paid for by the FDA that makes me want to rip out my hair, like try antidepressants instead because they're
Yeah.
safer. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I
I'm
went
sick of
back
the
and
word
forth with them.
safer.
Yeah, I
I'm
Okay.
said,
sick of that
please
word safer.
define safer. What do you mean
Right.
by this? I fought
Mhm.
and fought. I tried to get them. But again, it's like you have to kind of accept and know who you're working with, but also know that if you can just make it better and move the needle a bit, like
Yeah.
it's still good. And somebody now can take this document and say, here's this document by the ASAM. It's endorsed by 10 or 9 or 8 other medical societies in the US. It says right here that you're not supposed to cut me off my benzo. You're supposed to let me taper at 5 to 10% a month. It's still going to get people what they need eventually, which I think is support in the United States for coming off benzos slowly. So,
Mhm.
Yeah.
yeah.
I think from a consumer level though, there's such mistrust now. When you've been harmed, there's such mistrust in the FDA, in big pharma, in your prescribers. Like, any
Mhm.
insight on how to bridge that to kind of get what you need regardless of that mistrust? Because if you're just living in mistrust, then you're not moving your own needle at all either. And there's so much mistrust and anger and fear and all of that
Resentment.
in this, and
Yeah.
resentment and all the things
Yeah.
in this
Resentment's a
group.
bitch.
It
It,
Oh,
it, it
yeah.
is. I'm in it right now. It's horrible
Yeah.
because then you can't even when you try to take advice, even if it's just
Mhm.
general medical advice or anything, right? There's such a twist to it that you're just like, nope, I can't. So then you actually stop discontinuing other things or ideas that might actually be relevant and applicable and helpful to you, right? Because of
Yeah.
who it's coming from.
Yeah, you have
Mhm.
to you have to
Yeah.
constantly be checking yourself. Like, I think anybody who's been harmed in the way that I have has medical trauma. Like, that's normal. You're going to be traumatized by what's happened to you, especially if you had this horrible health crisis and everybody you met with told you it wasn't real, it wasn't happening, and you had nowhere to turn. That's the most awful position to be in. But I kind of laugh now because when I go into new medical providers, like it says on my chart, occupation, physician assistant. So I think when I come in, they think like I'm going to be one of them or whatever. And then they realize, like, oh, here's this difficult, non compliant person here.
Love
Tinfoil
What
it.
the
hat wearing
hell is
PA.
this? Yeah.
Yes, got that tinfoil
Yeah.
hat
I'm
on.
like, surprise,
Yeah.
but I'm not what they expect. And a lot of them don't like me, and I don't care because through what's happened to me, I realize like I am a consumer of medicine. I can spend my money in and finding care that is collaborative and that meets my needs. And if you're
Yeah.
going to be that overlord person in our relationship, I don't want it. I'll
Yeah.
leave, you're fired, and I'll find somebody better. So I think you have to kind of know that that's the landscape of medicine, at least in the United States. We don't have
Mhm.
like the NHS, where you have to deal with government.
Yep.
So that's one of the upsides of the US healthcare system, which is totally not that great, but
Mhm.
still,
Mhm.
you get to pick who you see. And um, I think you can also do your own research. Like you're responsible for your own healthcare. And I know that's hard for people because they want to just be able to
Oh,
like
as
Oh,
therapists, we
go
say
and
that to our
say,
clients all the time. They're like, "What do you
yeah,
mean we're responsible? It's why we're seeing you." No, actually,
yeah.
you're responsible.
Yeah.
It's
I mean,
actually
you know your own self best. You're the
Yep.
one living in your body.
Yep.
You have to take ownership.
Yep.
And I know that sucks because, yeah, I used to be somebody who wanted to just walk in and say, here you go, fix it.
Yep.
But that's
Mhm.
how I got injured, is just by blindly trusting and trying to hand over my agency to somebody else and let them do whatever they thought was right.
Man,
So
that's the
you have to
buzzword of the
read.
show,
Yeah.
agency. Almost every
Read,
person we have
study,
on here.
learn. Go
Mhm.
search
Agency.
and see if there's a support group for the thing that your doctor's trying to get you to take. If there is, what are these people complaining of?
Yeah.
Then make a risk benefit assessment for yourself. Is what I have bad enough that I'm willing to risk this, that, and the
Yeah.
other? Like, and that all of
Mhm.
medicine is risk benefit. Everything can harm.
Nicole, tell us a little bit about what happened to you in the psychiatric community. Give us a little bit of that story.
You mean like when I got prescribed and how I was treated
Yeah,
by,
you
yeah.
started to talk about it, and then we do what Terry and I do best, and we derail and just jump in. But
Yeah.
Sorry.
you started your story about being in school as a PA, and that was
Yeah.
your introduction to psych meds. And
Yeah. So the
kind of,
first psych med I took, although I didn't realize it was a psych med, was Zyban, which was for smoking, but it's really
yep,
Wellbutrin repackaged,
yep,
because I wanted to quit smoking. I figured, oh, if I'm going to be a PA, like I've got to leave behind this college cigarette thing that I started. Um, and I don't remember any harm from that one, although, at the time I was so naive, it could have changed my mood or done something, and I didn't pick up on it, but I wasn't on it long. And then when I graduated PA school, I think what a lot of people experience is kind of imposter syndrome. Like, I'm 20 something years old. I have these people's lives in my hands. I just went to school, but I don't have a ton of like experience other than my clinical rotations. And now I just have to like go out there and do this, like start practicing medicine. And so I had anxiety at work and stress from starting that. I also think, if I'm being totally honest, looking back, like I was still 20 something, so not taking the best care of myself.
yeah,
And staying up too late and having beers on the weekends with friends and stuff like that. So I wound up on Xanax, and it was prescribed me by one of my colleagues, actually, at the clinic that I was working at. Just very casual, nonchalant, like, take it as needed. It's great for anxiety. What you have is anxiety. And I think it turned on me quickly, as short-term benzos often do, where people start to get more anxious. So they're having something called interdose withdrawal, where the drug's wearing off and you're becoming super anxious, but you don't attribute it to the medication. You just think like, what's wrong with me? I'm becoming like this neurotic, I can't
yeah,
relax. And that's when I entered psychiatry. It Xanax made me suicidal thinking sometimes, and so that scared me, and I was, like, depressed, and so I was like, "Oh, I better see a psychiatrist." I thought I was helping myself because that's how we frame mental health. I don't even like that word in our societies, like, "Get help."
yep.
Going into these
Mhm.
institutions is helping yourself, it's healthy, and so that's what I thought. Um, and I entered into psychiatry, and for the next 5 years, I became, a victim of polypharmacy. I was drugged, nearly to death. 6 psych meds, at once. 2 of them were benzos, and 1 was a Z drug, sleeping pill, all of which
Mhm.
work, nearly the same. So I was
Yep.
on 3 of the same drugs, basically. Adderall, which also makes no sense when you're giving somebody all these downers and now you're giving them speed. My brain was
Well,
probably
sure it
like,
does. You need it
Well,
for
and it's
the
true.
symptoms caused by the other ones.
yeah, I
So
needed
Yeah.
to be able
yeah,
to
it actually
wake
it
up,
does make
right?
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Makes total sense, and then you needed the
Totally.
Yeah.
sleep aid because of the stimulant and all the
Yep.
other shit that you're
Yeah.
on. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's
Makes
Makes
total
sense.
sense.
exactly. And then
Mhm.
Remeron, because I lost tons of weight on
Right.
Adderall. And then
Yeah.
parked in front of the fridge and was eating cold chicken bones and Jello at 3 in the morning in bed, that whole side effect thing.
Mm.
Seroquel for sleep,
Yeah.
which you shouldn't be prescribing antipsychotics to people for sleep,
Off
but
off label, Nicole, it's fine.
yeah,
All the time.
exactly.
That is all the time, and kids get Seroquel for sleep all the time.
I cannot tell
Yeah,
you how many clients I have that is the exact trajectory of how Seroquel was entered
The
yeah.
chat.
into their treatment
Mhm.
plan. Yep.
Mhm.
So here I am on all these meds. I'm sicker than ever. And I started to not be able to function at work anymore. I was agoraphobic because I was so tolerant and introduced to the benzos that I started being unable to like leave my house. My neighbor would ring the doorbell and I would run upstairs and hide from fear and had no idea why I was doing that. Like I was just driven by fear
Yeah.
because these drugs had stopped working and I was getting rebound, terror and anxiety. And my dad, bless him, read an article in Outside Magazine by Matt Samet, who's a famous climber who had benzo injury, and he wrote his story in a mainstream magazine. And my dad just happened to be a subscriber to Outside, and he gave me the story, and I read it. And at first, I was like, oh, I'm tired. I don't want to be told that I rejected it at first, like, here's somebody who doesn't understand my mental illness, because I was bought into that. Every time I would go to the doctor and complain of
Yeah.
these things, the messaging I was getting was your mental illness is getting worse, you have treatment resistant this, you're going to have to manage your mental health for the rest of your life, etc. A very, you know, terrible message, a hopeless message,
Mm-hmm.
really.
Yeah.
But then eventually I sat with that more and I'm like, this guy like speaks my language. He described everything I'm feeling. And then it just like instantly switched. I was like, I'm being fucking poisoned and I need to get off of this shit. Like, holy crap, you know? And then I went into a detox center, which was the second stupidest mistake I ever made, because more medical advice told me,
Mhm.
oh, you're on benzos, you got to go to a rehab because most medical providers don't understand the difference between physical dependence and addiction. So when I asked for help with being on all these psych meds, because benzos and Adderall were in the picture, they just assumed that I was an addict. And I remember questioning at the time, and maybe this is a lesson for people when you're talking about like how to navigate healthcare. I had a gut feeling and I ignored it. And the gut feeling was, how does this make any sense? Every single person who sees a psychiatrist has to go to rehab. Like that is something's not adding up, you know? But I was scared of having a seizure and I thought, "Oh, I need somebody to oversee my care, so I'll just go there and whatever. It'll
I
take
think
30
that's
days."
what we're
Yeah.
told about it
Yeah.
more than sometimes more than like you're an addict because you're on benzodiazepine. It's more of you need a medically supervised detox thing,
Yeah.
which still is
Yeah.
too fast. It's too
Yeah.
fast and
So
too harmful.
fast. They do it in
Yeah.
a week, and then
Yes.
send you
Mhm.
Yeah.
home
I
like
was gonna
in
say,
with
were
Yeah.
you there a
anesthesia.
year, Nicole?
Yeah.
No.
No. No.
And
No.
the amount of shit I was on, it would have been way longer than a year
Oh,
if I would
sure.
have
Mhm.
done it properly.
Oh,
But no,
sure.
no. And I was gaslit all to hell in that place too,
So you were all of the psych meds that you were on were discontinued
Well,
within a week, or
no, they
just
kept the
the
ones that,
Adderall and the benzos?
yeah. So the ones they put in the bad addictive category, they rip you
Okay.
off of. The ones that are in the good medicine category, like Seroquel, they'll keep you on. Remeron, they keep you on.
Remeron. Okay.
Mm.
Yeah, but they don't
So
understand. That's what I
it was
mean. Like these
the
also cause
benzo and
physical
this,
dependence and
right.
withdrawal. The ones that you,
Yes.
and then they added more. Gabapentin, when I was in there, they added huge
Oh,
doses of
Jesus.
gabapentin. Yeah. So
So the
it's this
benzo is what you
fundamental,
were taken off of, the benzo and the
And the
stimulant.
stimulant.
yeah,
Mhm.
two benzos,
Okay.
Ambien, and Adderall all got
Okay.
essentially cold turkeyed in a week. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Well, you said I was gaslit all to hell during that time.
Oh my
Do you
gosh. Yeah,
Yeah,
in
explain
in the
that if you
detox.
would.
Oh, it's like,
Yeah.
I'm pacing up and down the halls and my feet are bleeding and from akathisia. And they had given me a little Dixie cup, as they do in those places, of Effexor, because that's the treatment. Oh, you're anxious, so now you need an
Oh.
SNRI instead of its withdrawal. And I took that one dose of it and it like imploded my nervous system. I had vertigo that was, I can't even put words to the vertigo that I had. It felt like somebody put my bed up on a stilt and just spun it in a circle. and I had akathisia. I was pacing, my skin was burning, and I was saying like, "Help me, something horrible's happening." And the next day, they came back to my room with another little cup of Effexor again and said, "You're not being compliant with your care. You're never going to get better if you don't take your medicine.
Jesus.
You don't want to get better."
Oh,
Um,
that you don't
yeah.
wanna get better. Mhm.
Yeah, and also those places are very 12-step,
Mhm.
that's their model. Everybody has
Mm-hmm.
to read the big book and all of this,
Yep.
which was totally irrelevant to I
Mhm.
wanted off of all of that crap badly. I didn't want to take it at all. And all these other people around me had, true addiction problems where they were really struggling with, avoiding use of a substance.
Mm-hmm.
And they would say to me, like, read chapter 4 in the big book. You're struggling with,
Oh my gosh.
surrendering or whatever. And I would just be like, what is this
Oh
place? Like,
my
how did I wind up
God.
in this place? They're going to kill me. And so I wound up calling a friend and was like, get me out of here before I die, essentially. Yeah.
Oh
Mhm.
my gosh.
That's because there are no detoxes and long-term really rehabs and things like that for this type of issue,
Yeah, I
for
mean, we
any
found
psychiatric
one at Vic
medication,
actually
really.
in Florida that does an outpatient benzo taper program associated with their rehab. I don't know if they're still
Mm,
open, but yeah, I mean, that's the state of affairs. One that we've come across that
Right.
knows, you know,
one.
but maybe things with
Mhm.
this new guidance from the ASAM will change. I don't know. I don't know how the rehab industry is regulated as far as can they
Not
Yeah.
well.
yeah, can they get in trouble for now if the standard of care is tapering, you know? But that was one
No,
of the
the rehab industry has its own set of huge
oh, yeah,
problems.
yeah. There's documentaries
Yeah,
about that
so
too. There's one called The
yeah,
Business of Rehab where, I think they give the grim statistics that like only 5% of people succeed in those places or something, and they cost, hundreds of thousands of dollars. But
Mm-hmm.
that actually was one
mhm.
of the complaints of the patient panel for the ASAM benzo guidance was there's a chapter in there that says if the patient's um, withdrawal is difficult or extreme, send them to an inpatient unit. And we're like,
Mm.
no,
Mm-mm.
they're not going to help. They're not going to know what to do. And they're just going to rip them off. And maybe the reason why the withdrawal is difficult for that patient is because the provider they're seeing has been going too fast. So in that case, you don't just go to rehab and rip them off. And we know providers are going to want to take that exit like, oh, you're difficult, go to rehab, because they don't want to have to deal
Goodbye.
with it,
Mhm.
instead of you probably need to updose, get stable and then taper slower and use one of these other techniques. So
Yeah.
that, yeah, we complained a lot about it, but it's still in there.
So
So
when you got out, your friend came, got you.
mhm.
At that point, the benzos, the stimulants were out of your body, and you
Yeah.
were on what SSRIs, SNRIs at that point.
Yeah, I was still on Remeron, gabapentin, and then they had added trazodone
Trazod.
as
Oh,
well.
okay.
Hmm.
Oh,
Oh,
help you with
that's
sleeping at
exciting.
night or what?
Yeah, that was
Okay,
the
so
intention. It wasn't
so
working
what'd you
because,
do?
yeah.
What happened then, Nicole? Tell
Hmm.
us about how you got your way through this to the end of getting off of these drugs.
Yeah, so I moved in with my elderly grandmother who had no business trying to take care of somebody in akathisia and, but we were all in my family like frantically trying to help me. We had no idea this could happen. When I went into the place, we all thought, oh, I mean, I had told my job, like, I'll be back in a couple weeks. That was my plan. So that's how naive I was to what was about to happen to me.
Mhm.
I never made it back to that job. My dad had to, go down and pack up my apartment and move everything home. So I had to move home. And for 4 months, I stayed in that state of severe withdrawal, thinking it's got to go away soon, not knowing, oh, protracted withdrawal is real and it can last for years. kind of another
You
way
probably
I
didn't even
was,
have those words
yeah, I was
then. Yeah,
still
you probably didn't have those words.
thinking in the medical mindset. Like, an admission I
Mhm.
can make is I went to Benzo Buddies and I read some of these people who were having symptoms at 5 and 6 years.
Yep.
And I was like, these are psych meds. They're probably mental patients. Like, I don't know if that's real. Like, how could
Dismiss,
Yep,
dismiss.
yeah.
Yeah, yep, yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and so apologies because protracted
yeah.
withdrawal is real and it does
Yeah.
happen and it
It's a
doesn't
bitch.
matter. I mean,
Mhm.
what is mental patient anyways? 1 in 5 people are on these meds in the US. So we're all mental patients at this point.
Apparently.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, but so I hung on for 4 months and it was so severe that I had a suicide attempt. Like, I was like, I can't do this anymore. I wound up in the ICU and luckily survived. So I'm happy
Wow.
that I'm alive. To anybody who's thinking about ending their life over psych med withdrawal, please don't. It's once you start healing, it's worth it to be here. Um, I reinstated some benzodiazepine, and that was enough to kind of keep me hanging on. It didn't fix the injury that my nervous system had sustained, but I was able to continue to carry on, and then I tapered over like 18 months to get off the small amount of benzo that I added back to, put some of the fire out of the rebound withdrawal that they had initiated. And then I just suffered in protracted withdrawal until my nervous system slowly, slowly, slowly started to recover from what had happened to me, and stayed busy, I feel like a huge part of healing is having purpose and helping other people and getting out of your own head. So, like, I needed distraction all the time, which is what my bio is about. I signed up for so many things just to like survive.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. And so now I'm here and I still have some symptoms left over from the injury, but it's, massively better from what it was.
I'm curious, and you may not know this question. What did your dad learn
So
from
much.
all of this?
In the beginning,
Yeah.
he was very typical MD. And to his
Mhm.
credit, he did say, like, I need to be your dad, like, and not your doctor. But I was looking to him to, like,
Yeah.
please fix me, help
Be
me.
both.
Yeah.
Yeah, at one point I
Mhm.
even said, like, put me to sleep. Because he's an anesthesiologist. I was just suffering so
Oh,
bad I didn't care,
yeah,
like,
Yeah.
can't you
yeah.
put me in a coma? But he would, in the beginning, he gaslit me a bunch too. He'd be like, this doesn't make any sense. You keep saying it's getting worse, but the longer you're off, it should get better. And when you
Mhm.
study withdrawal, you see that it can get worse before it gets better for lots
Mhm.
of
Mhm.
people. Um, he would say things, I think, in like a very tough love type of way to try to get me to kind of snap out of it. Like, oh, if you would just get off your ass and try harder. But that
Mhm.
was really the first year. And then he got way more educated and apologized and just said, like, I didn't realize how sick you were. And I thought to myself, well, I don't know how you couldn't realize, like, I was threatening suicide 50 times a day. But it was more about, I think, that he just didn't want to accept or, believe that this was possible. But after that, like, we healed and he has been like my biggest support. And, I would be dead if I didn't have him in my withdrawal.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
Yeah. I think he didn't see it,
Mhm.
because your arm wasn't broken.
Yeah, it's an
You
invisible.
didn't see a broken limb or a broken, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
when you don't see that and you just see somebody laying around or whatever, like, how long are you gonna be sick
Yeah, I
already,
mean, my
right?
stepmom
Like,
was like, we're not going to
mhm,
handle you with kid gloves. And I was like, barely alive. Like, I don't know if I can do this for another
mhm,
second. So people said like obnoxious shit like that to me all the time. Or I'd be like listing off symptoms and they'd be like, I get that. And I'm like, no, you don't. Like, I'm disabled. I can't function. I'm gonna die. I'm not sure I can
mhm,
survive this. So you don't get this. But even people
Mhm.
within the community kind of gaslight each other too, like because there's varying levels of withdrawal. So I noticed that people who had more
Mhm.
mild symptoms would say things to me. And I mean, at one point I was so ill, I had bed sores and like dreadlocks in my hair from not being able to get out of bed, you know? And there was people who would say like just push harder, or if you put on headphones you should be able to fly on an airplane, you know, stupid things like that, where it's like maybe that's your experience, but some
Mhm.
people are really severely ill in this, and that's not going to work. Like I think there's this, sometimes it's like think about what you say first, and this goes for people practicing medicine and people supporting people in withdrawal. Like people aren't stupid. If I could have put on headphones, you know, you think I wouldn't have just done that? Like, or
Right.
gone for a walk in
Mhm.
the sun? Like, I'm not dumb. I'm injured. I'm extremely sick. Um,
Mhm.
and so it's like we could all pause and think about like what's about to come out of my mouth, you know, and how's that going to affect the other person? And does it even make any sense, you know? It's that whole thing about listening to hear instead of to respond. And so many people just want to like say something instead of think about what they're about to say to somebody else.
And I think looking at people as if, they're not an outlier, because I feel like so much of the med harm community is looked at. Jen says her story, she's an outlier. Your story, that's an
Mm,
outlier. And I'm like,
Mhm.
well, if all these outliers exist, how do we have these big platforms out here of people who are injured? You know,
mm.
so I that's another gaslighty thing, is like it's your experience. That's not all the experience,
Yeah.
or most people don't have that experience. Well, maybe not. Maybe there's a lot of hidden injury that we don't know about yet because people aren't talking about it the way we are,
Yeah.
and
Well, to that
mhm.
I say, like, well, if it's not in your differential, you know, you guys know what differential diagnosis means. You have when you're a clinician, you start to make a list of what it could potentially be when you're trying to diagnose somebody. If you don't even put it on the list, you're never going to accurately diagnose it. So, yeah, maybe you've never seen it before because it's not even on your list of things that you're looking for, but that doesn't mean it's not there. And even if this is quote unquote rare, like by whatever percentage we define rare, so many people are on these medications that, you know, 15% of people taking them is a pretty big number, you know?
It
Mhm.
is. I always look at, big pharma advertising. Whenever they start advertising a new medication for something, like right now it's, tardive dyskinesia is being
Yeah.
advertised. That used to be very rare with an
Mhm.
antipsychotic. Like, that used to be what it was. I'm like, there's not that many people on antipsychotics, or there's more people on antipsychotics, or other classifications of medications are also causing these things. And akathisia, I think, is often misdiagnosed. Tardive dyskinesia and akathisia, I think, are,
Confused
they're
or,
close
yeah.
cousins.
Mhm.
Yeah, and there's a confusion between the two of them. So I'm thinking that some of that tardive dyskinesia stuff is really akathisia that you're seeing more and more of in other classifications. So I'm like watching intently where big pharma is putting their
Yep.
money,
Mhm.
because
Sure.
wherever they're putting their money is the medication or the side effect that's coming
Mhm.
out bigger, now than ever
Yeah.
before. So,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just interesting if you just sit back and listen, and you'll know that it's not outliers. It's not rare. It's not, if big pharma's putting money into marketing this thing, it's not
Yeah.
rare.
Yeah.
And now there's a pill to treat the injury from previous pills.
The
Yeah.
rare injury, the rare,
Yeah.
yeah, it's not rare if big pharma is soaking tons of
Yeah.
money into it, you know what I mean? Like, it's not rare.
Well, there
So,
was a recent, you
and
know, Wall Street Journal article about benzo harm, and the journalist told me, well, this we had more response to this um, article than all articles, and she's like, that tells me there's a massive problem that we've had hundreds and hundreds of
mhm,
people writing in. We don't get that response, she says, you know, from most things that we put out. So something's here. But she said, yeah, some of the responses were physicians saying, oh, this is so rare. You know, you've made it seem like it's a regular occurrence. And she's like, well, then why are so many, like, why do we get
Mhm.
massive
Yeah.
response from people, you know?
Mhm.
It's funny because even on social media, I'll have, the random physician or nurse or whatever come on and be like, "You're causing these things don't
Yes.
do that to people, whatever." And I just go, "Read the comments." There's 300
Yes.
comments of people on here, and I'm
Yeah.
like, and that's on my small little platform,
Yeah.
So it's like if you just
Yeah. And
read,
even if it's
and pay
rare, like
attention.
you're saying,
Yeah,
these people still deserve to treatment. Like it's
correct.
iatrogenic,
Yeah,
even if it's a small population of people who are having this really severe adverse reaction. Like we have to help them. You have to be able to accurately diagnose it and help them.
Right.
You don't just write
well, if
people off and
if
say,
a certain type of cancer were
yeah.
rare, people would bend over backwards trying to figure out how to solve this rare, rare, rare
Mm-hmm.
cancer, but in the psychiatric world, if it's rare, it's like, well, it's just rare.
Mm-hmm.
We're just gonna let you be over here in the, in the y- not med harmed community, but the I can't think of what it is, resistant
Mm-hmm.
community. You're just resistant. Your body's resistant. We're just gonna stick you over there.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's no call to help the rare side effect. There's no call out. It's just like, yeah,
Well, or
we don't know
it's
what to do.
categorized as just part of like the mental illness as well,
Mm-hmm.
right? Yeah,
Oh, that's true.
it's
Yeah.
categorized as part of that. We just had Angie Peacock on from Medicating Normal, and she talked about that. She's like, if I end my life right now, this is what it's going to be: is I'm just going to be that harmed PTSD harmed vet, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that's what will
The mentally
that's
ill person
the
that took
mentally
their
ill
own life.
person who
Hmm.
couldn't make it, when in reality, that's really not what it was about. But that's what that those rare conditions end up being. We blame it on the mental illness, when in reality, that's not what is causing all of this. Right? It has nothing
Yeah.
to do with the mental illness. Nicole, you weren't somebody who was a mentally ill
No.
patient.
Yeah, I just had stress at work, you
Yes.
know? Yeah.
Yeah, the
The
origin
the origin
story
story
is
is just, yeah, it
fascinating.
is, like,
Mhm.
and that's not what
Mhm.
it was for you, right? And as you look at all those years and what went on, it wasn't somebody who was severely mentally ill. It was a product, a byproduct of psych harm, med harm.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess then it comes back to how you define mental illness. If we're casting the net so wide that we catch everybody, then sure. I
Yep.
was quote unquote
Mhm.
mentally ill by DSM standards because
Oh, yeah.
everybody is, you
We all are.
know?
Everybody
Yeah.
is, everybody
We all
is.
are.
But
Yep.
no, I
Yeah, I
was
say that a
high
lot, we
functioning.
cast a larger net, we catch more
Yeah.
fish, and we catch a lot of fish that shouldn't be in the net in the first
Yeah.
place. So,
Yeah.
yes,
But,
you're
a
100%
lot of
correct.
what medicine does that's partly responsible for this is like that old saying, if all you have is a hammer, everything's a nail, right?
Yep.
So
Mhm.
when I went back to my psychiatrist and I'm in severe withdrawal, she was like, of course you feel terrible. You're mentally ill. You need your psychiatric medications. You've stopped treating your mental illness. And then I went to the rehab place and said, I'm suffering all these symptoms so bad. And they say, well, you're a drug addict. You're wanting, to take more medication. You're just
Mhm.
craving and all this. And it's like everybody's walking around with these hammers. And I'm like, these are all medical professionals in the same exact system, but they're all diagnosing me with different stuff just based on what their specialty is. And no one's listening to what I'm telling them, which is I'm
Mm.
in withdrawal from this stuff.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, that
Correct.
was it. As we wrap up here, Nicole, is there anything that you want our listeners to know, or anything that you haven't talked about that is important, especially for those that are going through this?
I think just, for anybody who's on these medications, I would say get curious, read about them, learn about them, and maybe they're still for you. Maybe you come to that conclusion and that's okay.
Yeah.
But I think we can all, instead of like when people are saying something bad happened to me, one sort of example I like to use is when Toyota sends me a recall notice in the mail for my car, right? I'm grateful. I'm like, "Oh, crap, something's wrong, the airbag or whatever. I better
Mhm.
look into this and believe it and fix it." But why, when somebody says medication harmed me, are we so like, I don't want to hear that story. And so get curious about like, why is that your response initially, especially if you're somebody taking it, like both things can exist at the same time, I think, where people feel helped by something and people are very harmed too.
Ah,
So we just need to have,
Mhm.
more open communication and conversations about this without being so polarized, I think. Yeah.
great.
Agree. All right. If you've hung out with us so far, please make sure you like, comment, share, give us all the stars. That's all that's necessary. All the stars. Send us your Gaslit Truth at the Gaslit Truth Podcast at gmail.com. And thank you, Nicole Lamberson, for
Yeah,
hanging out
thank
with
Yeah.
you,
us.
Thanks for
Nicole.
having me.